Hello, and welcome to another episode of Game, Develop, Repeat, the podcast where we talk about a game that I enjoy, what makes it special, and what we as game developers can learn from it. I'm your host, Chris, a music educator turned indie game developer, and today's episode is all about change. In this episode, we discuss suffering in games, emotional spectrums in gaming, and games with intentional messages. Let's get to it. How am I going to describe change? I think the first thing to say is that it is a homeless simulator. It is a homeless survival experience. At the beginning of the game, you have become homeless and you must work your way out of being homeless. Normally, I don't go in on games that are super tied to reality, super tied to real life, but something about this game appealed to me. Maybe it's because I have a fear of homelessness, right? Like it seems like it's like a scary thing to experience, or maybe it's just because I was curious about the premise. But whatever it is, it pulled me in and I was like, yeah, let's play this, let's learn about this, let's see what the deal is. And the game's gameplay is oddly compelling. It manages to suck you into this character and make you feel like you have a chance, but at the same time, you're up against these forces that are really beyond your control. Like things change within the city, and you don't really have control over how the people react to you all that much. You have different strategies that you can choose to work your way out of homelessness. And honestly, once you figure out a process to get out of homelessness in this game, it's pretty straightforward. It's just a really miserable grind, and if you get unlucky, it can make it a lot worse. Um, so that's kind of a weird element of this game. It's almost a one-time play. Like you play it once and you go back in, and it's a completely different experience because now you kind of know what you're doing. But that first experience, when you don't really know what you're doing, is a lot more interesting because you're just like on the street trying to figure out what the heck you're supposed to do about this. Like what is the move? What is the strategy? There's a bunch of different ways to get money, and they all have different risks to them. And it's interesting to try to kind of min-max that and also figure out which strategies you're willing to do. I recently replayed it a couple times. I beat it 2 times recently just to kind of like freshen up on it. And it was still a good experience. It's still compelling. There's been a lot of changes to it over the years, but the core gameplay loop is still kind of the same. And I think this game has me thinking a lot about intentional messages in games, and maybe we'll talk about that a lot more in the develop section of this. And like I do think that some developers want to have a very intentional message in their game. They're tying it into some sort of like mental illness is a common thing to talk about within indie games, or they're tying it into some societal thing or whatever. And sometimes it plays really well and sometimes it doesn't. And I do think that change plays really well. I do think that the way that they have conveyed this message is pretty tasteful, and it's pretty like it's something you can experience without feeling like you are just getting slammed in the face with some kind of a message. Like nobody wants to play a game and be preached at. And for me, I didn't feel like I was being preached at. I felt like I was going through a simulation. Like I felt like I was trying to experience this thing, and the game was helping me have like the tiniest bit of empathy for this experience. And let me be very clear about this. There's no way that playing a homeless survival simulator will give you genuine empathy for the experience. But maybe you can play this game, and then the next time that you interact with a homeless person, there'll be a little tickle in the back of your head that says like, yeah, but that must be so much worse than I could even imagine, and the things that I'm imagining are pretty bad already, right? Like you can be thinking about like, oh man, what if I had to rob a store for food? Because in change, you can end up in a situation where you're like, I need to rob a store for food. And if you're willing to do it in this video game, would you be willing to do it in real life? Probably, right? Like, if you're starving to death in real life, that has a lot more impact on your decision making than like your character starving in a video game and it making them unhappy. Like, the stakes are different, sure. Anyway, whatever. My point is, maybe it can open up a path towards empathy, and that's kind of interesting. And this whole concept of using a game for something like that is super interesting. Now, personally, I'm pretty purely in the I want to make a game that feels fun camp. So when a game like this is fun, at least for me, when it appeals to me, it is fun, then I'm like, okay, great, fantastic. This happens to be fun for me and it's exploring a topic I'm interested in. That's marvelous, right? Like, beautiful. If a game is just exploring some topic and trying to teach you about it and kind of boring about, like, we all played those like educational games as a kid. Some of them were really fun, some of them were really good. There were a couple like math games that I remember enjoying because somehow they managed to truly gamify it. But like, there was at least one that you played where you were like, oh geez, I really don't need to go through how to spell waffle like this. This is miserable, right? Like, there's some kind of weird spelling game or whatever that you played where you're like, this game is terrible. It shouldn't even be a game. Can we please just put me at a desk, give me a crossword or whatever the assignment is, and have me do it that way, rather than putting me in front of a computer and pretending that we're playing a video game when we're not, right? Anyway, sorry, apparently some kind of childhood trauma or something. I don't know what that was. Apparently, I have strong feelings about those games. Oh man, that makes me think. There's that. There's a game that is a brilliant parody of that style of game, and I wish I could remember the title of it right now, but I can't, unfortunately. It's like a learning math game. If anybody remembers it, you'll know you'll know what I'm talking about. There's no way that I'm even gonna find the title if I start searching for it. But it is a famous parody of those old school learn math games, and it involves being a frog and like licking flies. And then by the end of the game, you end up going through this whole insane adventure. And I can't even talk about the game without spoiling it, so I'm not going to go any further than that. Anyway, um, okay, so I think I've gotten out most of my thoughts about change. I actually don't have that many thoughts about it. The gameplay loop is straightforward. It involves like anything that you would imagine. Um, well, okay, there's like a studying mechanic. There's like a recycling cans mechanic for change, right? There's a begging mechanic, of course. There's like a dog that you can get, like you can get like a little pet companion. You can have different backgrounds for your character, depending on what you've unlocked. So you can just be poor, you can have a mental illness, you can be a veteran. You can have all these different things. There's a busking mechanic, which I've never really gotten much out of. There are jobs you can get. There's a whole thing involving like being at a homeless shelter for however long. There are bars, you can develop addictions. There's a lot going on in the gameplay. And that's what I think that's what takes it from, oh, this is just like some exploration of this concept for some kind of social message, to, oh, this is a game. Because it's very clear that the person who was making, or the people who were making this game, I'm not sure how many people were involved. Sorry about that. It's a very improvisational podcast. My bad. I don't do a ton of research beforehand other than playing the games. The person or people involved in making this game clearly cared about gameplay and wanted to make a game that was compelling in and of its own right, and they happened to care about this topic. And so they were like, okay, well, let's do this topic for the game. And that's what I appreciate about it is if you're going to make a game with a message, make sure you're making a game with a message, not a message in the trappings of a game, right? Those are two very different things. And I think that applies in a lot of different ways, right? Like, authentically be the thing you're trying to be. Don't just use it as a vessel for something else. It's kind of maybe I can elaborate on that a little more in the next section, which is coming up right now. So if you're making a game about some real life topic, my point that I want to make, and I'm going to try to keep this point brief because it's just my own opinion on it. I believe that it is better to have a genuine interest in the topic and convey your interest in the topic and just make the game about that. To make a game about it because you're interested in it and want to turn it into a game than to make a brochure disguised as a game. So if somebody comes in and they say, hey, we really want to make a game to teach people about homelessness, I'm going to be like, okay, hold on, though. Is this because you were just trying to make something about homelessness for the sake of the cause, or is it because you believe that homelessness is going to make a compelling game and you want to do something for the cause? Because a game about homelessness may not be the most... If you just... This is so delicate and hard to phrase. If you make a game about homelessness specifically as a PR move for homelessness, the game has to be good, and the game's not going to be good if you're making it just as a PR move. That's really what I'm trying to convey. I would have no problem with making a game specifically as a PR move if the game was going to come out good, but it's not going to because it's a PR move. And in order for a game to be good, there have to be people who have an authentic interest in making the best possible version of that, in making a truly interesting game. And then you will get people to pay attention to it and learn about it because it's a genuinely compelling piece of art. But if you're making a piece of art as a PR move, it's not going to be a compelling piece of art unless the person making it has a very specific background and like happened to get tied into it somehow just because, like there's like circumstances that can happen. No hard rules, whatever. Let's move forward. I think I've made my point. Making suffering into gameplay. This is super interesting to me. If we are going to look at any game, you're sitting there, you're playing the game, you've got highs and lows that you experience throughout your gameplay, right? And you're exploring a specific emotional range internally. The game is taking you through different sets of, or different magnitudes of some emotion. Like maybe you're experiencing joy and then sadness and then joy and then sadness. Or maybe you're within joy and you get like more joy and less joy, right? You're experiencing this kind of like sine wave of emotion. Ups and downs. And a game can explore some specific emotions. So you can have like tension and release in a whole bunch of different categories. You're playing a horror game, it's all about fear. It's all about the tension and release of fear. You're playing like a clicker game or like some kind of like a gambling kind of mechanic. It's about the tension and release of like expectation, of like kind of excitement. It's almost like a positive anxiety, right? There's competitive ones. There's all these different feelings you can go through. This game, Change, explores the highs and lows of despair, of suffering. And I find that interesting because you would think that you wouldn't want to play a game that explores suffering. Why would you sit down and turn on a game that's all about suffering? It sounds like it's inherently a bad time. This is why this interests me. When you open up Change, you go, okay, I'm going to be homeless now. And you now set your baseline expectations. You go, okay, here's what I expect to receive. I expect to be homeless. I expect to not have any money. I expect this, that, the other. And then anything that goes better than that is a win. And anything that goes worse than that is a loss. So now you're able to perceive the world through this different scope, and the wins are all very different and the losses are all very different, right? And this is what fascinates me about it, because we can set that baseline expectation in our game and then set how high and low we stray from that baseline expectation. Does your game have massive highs and lows? Does it have a pretty tight loop? And how much does that affect player retention? If your game has a really huge low, does that kick people out of the game? Do people quit? Are people like, I'm done with this? Or are they like, I have to get out of this low? It's going to depend on the game. I'm sure it's going to depend on the type of gameplay. It's going to depend on, is it a story low? Is it compelling? And then the individual player and all this stuff, right? Like, is it a gameplay technical challenge? You can explore these emotional ranges, and I want to explore that more, basically, is what I'm getting at. I wish I had more to say about this because it's genuinely extremely fascinating to me, and I think it's one of the more interesting elements of like game design is trying to look at this emotional impact that you have and seeing how wide that impact can be and how hard it hits people. And I don't think that there are tight controls for it. I think the controls for this are very loose, and it has to be because it's going to have a very different impact on everybody who plays the game. But I think being aware of this impact is really valuable. Being aware of the fact that you are playing with somebody's emotions. I do think to some extent game design is you messing around in somebody's head and pulling little triggers and activating little dopamine receptors or whatever and going, feel this way, and just kind of nudging them this way or the other. And I think that's also part of the reason why sometimes you play something and you're like, it's just not fun. I don't know why, right? Because we don't know how that's all going to play out. We don't know what's activating what. Like, and honestly, same thing with like movies and music and all this stuff. There's all this subtlety to it, and I just want to explore it more. That's really oddly that's what I take from this homeless simulator. Is I want to explore this emotional range idea. I want to explore this idea of like, if I make a game about suffering, how happy can it be before it breaks the suffering feeling? How bad can it be? How depressing can it be before the player quits? Does it make them want to dig themselves out of the hole? Conversely, if I make a game about succeeding, if I make a game about absolutely killing it in life, what happens then? Right? Do you just go, well, I've finished, I've accomplished everything, so I'm out, I'm done? Do you, I mean, maybe Cookie Clicker is that game. Maybe you just go for the higher number over and over and you just constantly try to increase the level of your baseline, like constantly, and then it just becomes this hedonistic adaptation thing. It's an interesting thing. It's a whole interesting thought to consider the emotional impact, but at the same time, I kind of feel like all we can do is sit down and make the game we want to make, and then it's other people's jobs to react to it. I'm of multiple minds on this question. This is something I need to think through a lot. And I think the best way to think through it, this is kind of always how I am with these things, is to just do it. I think the best way to figure it out is to just keep making stuff and explore different things. And this does tell me that at some point I want to explore a game that has a pretty tight objective as far as like what emotion it's trying to play with. Like maybe I want to make a horror game so that I can really just focus in on fear, right? Maybe I want to make a game that focuses in on like relationships, or maybe I want to focus on anxiety. I think that's everything I have to say about making suffering into gameplay. Let's talk about my own game development real quickly. My game suddenly feels finished. I know what happened. I did a couple things and then all of a sudden I was like, oh my God, my game feels done. Which was a really weird moment. It's not done. There's still a couple things I need to do and add and whatever, but it is at a point where I could publish it and go, yeah, fair enough, right? It reached that point and then I went, whoa, that's crazy. That's weird. This is a weird moment for me. I updated the demo right before I reached that point. So the demo only has one song. It has one sound effect that I hate that I've already changed. As soon as I posted that demo, I was like, God, this sound effect is terrible. I got to fix it. It's the jump sound effect. It has a spring noise in it. I hate it. It's terrible. But the demo is updated. I'm not sure if it works on Mac. Apologies, I haven't checked that yet. The Windows one worked on my computer. There was a small bug that I ran into, which I think is related to my gamepad, but long story short, if you start the game and it doesn't let you move, exit out and start it back up, and it should let you move. I'm going to test to see if I can find a source of that. I think it's a gamepad thing, but that's not a very well-educated guess. That's just me guessing that because I've had that issue with other games, and I'm wondering if it's just like a thing that happens with my controller sometimes. But anyway, yeah, game suddenly feels finished. Super weird. Watched my brother play test it for like over an hour. That was great. He got pretty far. The only stuff I've been fixing, there were a bunch of individual level bugs that he caught. I just ripped through those really quick. I need to play through it again, check a couple things, make sure that we're all clear. I want to create some kind of a progress tracking mechanism. I don't actually want to lock the levels. I think I want to leave all the levels unlocked so you can play any of them from the beginning. But I do want to track your progress and like highlight levels that you've finished or full cleared or cleared under a certain amount of time or whatever. So whatever version of that I can finish in time, great, I'll do that. That's soot development. It suddenly feels very finished, and that's cool. There's still a lot to do, and I still got to put up a Steam page, and I got to decide whether or not to make an LLC before I publish the game. There's still stuff, right? Yeah, so that's the thing. And then the other thing I've been doing that's kind of development adjacent is I've been learning art. I've just started doing this. I'm using Draw-a-Box, which is like a free online learning resource. I'm doing that to learn to draw and to learn kind of spatial reasoning and like that sort of stuff for art skills. And then I'm also doing pixel art on my own. And I did this thing, I kind of tied this into the end of my day. So I'm like, the last couple hours of the day, I'll just go to the library and I'll draw for a while, right? Or I'll do whatever. It's kind of an alternative during the week to playing a game. Because I find that if I play a game during the week, I stay up really late and then I throw off my whole schedule and then I become unproductive. If I work on art for the last couple hours of the day, then I'm tired out and I go to bed and it's great. And I feel really like fulfilled for having done something different and kind of exciting. And I need to learn art if I'm going to be a solo dev. My games need to be visually appealing because that's a huge part of getting sales is just like the visual appeal. And that is my weakness. I need to be stronger with the visuals for sure. Yeah, that's everything going on with my own development. Let's wrap this show up. Got a couple questions about whatever project you are currently working on, whatever game you're working on, or piece of art, whatever. Does your game implicitly convey some message? Do you want it to? Just interesting to ask yourself. What emotions does your game explore? And then what have you learned from this project so far? I want to tag on a couple notes about this. For the what emotions does your game explore? I feel like it does. Like you might initially think it doesn't explore any particular emotion. Just through playing the game, your player is going to have some kind of emotion well up in their body, even if it's super, super subtle. Like maybe it'll be anxiety about whether or not they're going to land on that platform. Maybe it's like a tightness in their body from like a timing challenge or something. But there's some emotion, whether or not we have a word for it. And then as far as what you've learned from the project, even if you're in the very beginning phases of the project, you've already learned something. So you don't have to be at the end to ask that question. Now, for the tip for this week, my thought process here is make small projects. And I'm saying this because Soot started as a small project and it got bigger. And the only reason that it has gone okay and now feels finished is because it started so small that when it got bigger, I was able to manage how much bigger it got without losing my mind. If I had started with the goal of taking a year to make this game, then it would have gotten bigger and I would be very much in trouble right now. Right? Yeah, I would still have so much more time to go. But I aimed for a very quick project. And when it did get bigger, I was able to lock down a timeline and say, okay, here are the hard limits, and boom, locked it in, right? So small project, but don't be afraid to take risks. Whatever that means to you, reasonable risks, but we gotta take some risks in order to learn. We gotta fail. We gotta fail a lot in order to learn. I fully expect this game, when it's published to objectively fail from a financial perspective. I would be astonished if I did not lose money on this game. I'm going to lose money on this game. That's how it's going to work. but I'm going to gain so much more value than the amount of money that I'm losing, right? In terms of actual money that I'm putting down, it's going to be like $100 because I'm making all my own stuff, whatever. More than that, I guess, because I probably bought one or two like tools along the way and like some subscriptions. Fair enough. But the amount of value that I'm getting out of this is enormous. Even if we value my time at a certain number of hours, or like even at a certain number of dollars per hour, even if we do that, I'm still getting an enormous amount of value, just in terms of the lessons that I'm learning from this and the long-term investment that I'm getting out of it. That's my take on this. But yeah, you only learn if you fail, and in some respects, this project is going to fail, and that's fine, because that's how you learn, and that's just gonna be the first project, and then maybe the second maybe your first 10 projects fail, but they didn't, because you made them, so you didn't fail. That's everything I got for this week. I hope you have a good week. Enjoy yourself, play some games, make some stuff, take some risks, learn something new. If you want to learn art, try Draw a Box. His advice on the 50% rule is the best statement, the best explanation I've ever heard of the feeling of being ready to do something but not being able to do it. It's because you haven't practiced the part where you're just doing it, basically. But he explains it way better. You might want to check out Draw a Box, even if you're not going after the art stuff. That's everything I got. Have a good one. I went on a tangent again. Have a good week. Enjoy yourself. Make some stuff. And I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.